Welcome to the writing process of bestsellers. If this is not the panel you want to be at, now is a good time to go. I am here with 3 New York Times bestsellers, and I would like them to introduce themselves one at a time and let us know what they've written, if anyone here doesn't know yet. And also, just to keep things interesting with the introductions, what is the first thing you remember writing? And let's start to my left with Kevin.
Hi, I'm Kevin Hearne, and I've written the Iron Druid Chronicles, which is now up to book 8, plus some novellas and short stories with it. And I have also written Star Wars: Heir to the Jedi. And in terms of the first thing I wrote, it was a nightmare sequence of my junior high principal, who had one of those really, very large, like Michael Strahan gap between his front teeth. And he always called everybody buddy. When we were like, you were so clearly not our buddy, you're, the mean authority figure. And so there was just a lot of dead frogs everywhere, and my junior high principal, and it was such a weird image that I had in this dream. I started to try to write that and make something out of it, but I think I got to page 50 and ran into the wall. So that was my first failed novel, the first of many, until I finally got around to writing Hounded, but yeah, there you go. There you go.
Hi, I'm Carrie Vaughn. I write the Kitty Norville series about a werewolf who hosts a talk radio advice show for the supernaturally disadvantaged. The first thing I ever wrote, I was 8 years old, and I had just read The Black Stallion, and I wrote Black Stallion fan fiction with girl horses instead of boy horses. So it was a short story called Sally the Horse. And the second grade teacher was very impressed. She gave me like 3 gold stars for it. And I was like, you mean you can get gold stars for writing? I think I like this thing. I think I'll do more. And so yeah, I wrote Black Stallion fan fiction with girl horses.
That's awesome.
Does somebody say that listening to Kevin talk about what he wrote the first time around explains so much? I'm Carrie Brooks. I write nonfiction about elves. And I've written, a few books, and short stories and adaptations from one thing or another. But I do remember clearly the first thing I wrote, and I was 10 years old at the time, in the 4th grade, and I did an assignment, and it was a story. We were supposed to write a short story piece of fiction. And it was about 4 boys who stayed overnight in a haunted house. And they found out that during the course of staying there, which they thought was haunted and so forth, well, they had aliens inside it in the basement. They had a rocket ship in the basement. At the end of the story, they were chased off, and they got the rocket ship and blew up the house and flew away, and the kids went home. And that was my first. It was important because it was the first thing I'd written where the teacher said, this really shows a lot of imagination, which he was being kind, I'm sure. And she gave me an A+, and I really think that's launched my writing career.
It's those gold stars, man.
Yeah.
You just want to keep getting them.
So, since you guys are all professional writers now, I was wondering, when did you really start writing in a professional sense, and what changes did you have to make in your life to accommodate that?
Go for it, yeah.
I was published at 13. But it's not as glorious as it sounds. I lived in Illinois, and I wrote a story on Lincoln because all kids in junior high school wrote a story on Lincoln. It was mandatory. So I wrote mine, and they liked it well enough that they published it in their little county historical journal. So I knew I was on my way. And 20 years later, I wrote Sword, and that became my first work of published. I was very lucky because I came along at the right time. I came along right after Tolkien, and there wasn't anything else out there like it, and Sword was very like it. And so I ended up selling millions and millions. And today, I still sell quite a few of that book just because there's not a lot else out there with the Tolkien stamp on it. So that's kind of defines my whole career.
Go ahead.
I decided pretty early on that I wanted to write professionally because I wasn't really good at anything else. Like, teachers kept putting gold stars on my stories, and I came in last in my first cross-country race, so it's like, well, what am I going to, where's my validation here? I wrote my first short story that wasn't fan fiction, anything, and sent it out to analog science fiction when I was about 16. It got rejected. So I did it again and again and again and again. It took me a long time to actually get published, to actually break in. So I decided to do it in high school, and from there kind of launched on this 10-year odyssey of trying to actually write well, which I wasn't doing at age 16. I thought I was, but I just didn't know any better. 10 years later, I actually sold my first professional short story, and at that point, this was what I wanted to do, so I just had to keep working at it and keep working at getting better. I started out in short stories and eventually wrote a short story that ended up being like 40,000 words long, and realized it wasn't a short story, that maybe I ought to give this novel thing a shot. And eventually moved into novels, partly because if you want to make a living at writing, especially writing fiction, then novels are a good way to do it. You can't really make a living at short stories, but novels, it's a little easier. And so that's where I put my energy, and it took a long time, but I did it. So.
I think about everything we wrote at 16 years old and how good it was at the time.
So good. So good.
And then you go back, say 20 years later and look at it and you think, oh my God.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to write, since starting at 19, I read One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and was so impressed with what Casey did with Chief's voice there, and how the very language changed as Chief's mental health improved. And I thought it was so masterfully done, and I wanted to write like that. And this is really the reason I write in first person, and why I'm so fascinated by giving people their own language structures and voices. So I wrote for 19 more years before I got published. Because I was an English teacher, I really thought that I just knew what I was doing, but I didn't. And I failed a lot, but I just kept going because I kept having more stories that I wanted to tell. My first one was called The Road to Cibola. It was absolutely terrible and full of cliches. But getting that done just took me 6 years, just of me trying to write this while I have a full-time job. Actually, I had 3 jobs for a while because kids are expensive. And so diapers, man, right? So I had a lot of stuff going on, and I was just working on it a little bit at a time. Once I got that done and I realized it was terrible, I just went on to the next thing. What the important part was realizing I can finish a novel. That just completing that first one gave me so much confidence. The next one was twice as long and took half the time because I knew that I could do this now. And then my third novel, that was also crap, by the way. It was an epic fantasy full of cliches. But the third one was Hounded. And by the time I got around to writing Hounded, I had written quite a bit, and I had learned a lot from my mistakes. So if you wish to tell stories, just don't give up. Just keep telling them. And eventually you're going to hit your stride, I think. I mean, it took me quite a while, but I got first published at 39. Just stick with it.
I'm assuming a lot of people in the audience here are here because we want to know about the writing process of bestsellers, because we're kind of trying to be writers ourselves. Just wondering, can I get a show of hands? How many people are writers or aspiring writers?
Okay.
Right?
Awesome.
Yeah, almost everyone. Excellent. So I'm assuming a lot of us want to know, I personally would like to know, do you have a dedicated writing space, and what does it look like? Or do you just write wherever?
You want to go first this time?
Oh, sure. Thank you. I have a very messy office, and it's at home. I know a lot of writers who have external offices. They like to go somewhere to write, but I really like being at home with my reference library and my teapot and my dog all right there. It's really, really messy. I write on a computer. So I have a desk that's kind of in the corner, and I have a bulletin board that has like my to-do list and just a lot of pictures and things on it. I do tape inspirational notes to my screen sometimes, like if it were easy, everybody would be doing it, is a big one that I have to remind myself of often. Or don't worry about what everyone else is doing is a big one. And other than that, it's very, very messy because I am one of those people who organizes with piles. And so there's the pile of things I'm working on now, and the pile of things I would like to be working on, and the pile of things I haven't figured out what to do with yet. And it's all on my desk, and it works for me.
That's really organized compared to me. You got 3 whole piles with names.
They do. do. I don't always. I mean, sometimes they migrate.
Yeah.
But that's okay.
As they do, yeah.
I know where to look for things. So.
That's awesome.
Nobody else does. Heaven forbid I send somebody to my office to fetch something.
Well, I have some good news for you, maybe. What I didn't understand when I started out was how much things were going to change as I got older. So the way my life was as a writer then is no longer the way it is now. And I tend to have monk-like tendencies. I'm talking about the character on TV. So for me, to be able to write for many years, I had my dedicated space, which is an office space. Well, it is now. Then it was sort of a closet. But it's my computer's there, my desk's there, my pens are lined up neatly. I don't use pens, I use a computer. But I have to have them lined up. The stapler's right here, and everything has to be where it is, and it has to be quiet. I can't function if there's any noise at all. So if the neighbors are out there mowing the lawn, I go out there and say, "Stop mowing your lawn," which they really don't appreciate. So anyway, that's the way it was. But now, suddenly, in these last 5 years, I've discovered that I can write on airplanes and in hotel rooms and in spurts of a page or two at a time, and I don't seem to lose the train anymore. I don't fuss about it so much. So I think that's an indicator that whatever your writing habits are, they're probably not as important as you might think, except for one. And we would all tell you that that is the one that says, put your butt in the chair and write, and do it every day.
Yeah. I really enjoyed this study I read one time about a messy desk is a sign of a creative mind. I felt really validated. It's like, thank you, sociological science, or whoever got a grant for that particular study. Because I just point to that every time my wife walks into my study and goes, how are you existing in this mess? And I'm like, well, it's perfectly awesome to me. I love this here. So I do have a space, my study, that is dangerous to walk into. And then I have, I write anywhere, like Terry is these days. In fact, I was editing outside about a half hour ago. So I bring my work with me wherever I go and get a little bit done at a time, because it's that slow and steady stuff that kind of gets it done. I'm not super fast, but just being able to get 1,000 words done a day when you are, if you're consistent with that, well, hey, in 3 or 4 months, you've got yourself your novel done, right? So that's the approach I kind of take to it. So, all right.
I think it's true, worth saying too, that if you have a bad day, if there are intrusions on your life, if the muse is not whispering in your ear, that's too bad. Write anyway. Write anyway. Because the funny thing is, at least for me, is that frequently the things I love the most are the things I wrote on days when I thought I wrote crap. Mm-hmm. So I just don't think there's a measuring stick for that sort of thing.
And if you do get stuck, I find that, if you go outside and yell at somebody to stop mowing their lawn, or whatever it is, whatever works for you. But whenever you get outside for a little while and just get the blood pumping through your brain, just go for a walk, something. And you'll find that during that walk, at least for me anyway, something shifts in your head and you're able to come back and keep going. Plus you got your exercise for the day. And yeah, now you can have that drink.
So going off of that, how much of the time that you're writing is usually hands on keyboard, and how much is other things, other work? And what is that other work?
I get asked about that all the time, and I have no way of measuring. I think it would be really instructive to kind of put cameras in writers' rooms sometimes and actually count, keystrokes and things like that, because it would be really appalling to all of us, how little time we spend actually typing. And then how much of that typing is backspacing and cutting and pasting. And, so I get asked that all the time, and I have absolutely no way of measuring, because I spend a lot of time, walking the dog, working on, the subconscious is doing stuff. Time on keyboard, do I count all of the revision time? Because every single novel I have written, I get to a point about halfway to 2/3 of the way in where I get completely stuck. And it's usually because I haven't figured out the plot entirely. I hesitate to call it writer's block, because what it is my subconscious saying, dude, stop. You don't have a handle on this. Back up and figure it out. And then I usually, I stop, I take a notebook and a pen and move to a different room and write and just brainstorm, like, what the heck am I trying to say here? At which point I figure it out, but then I have to go all the way back to the beginning and kind of rework that first half of the book in order to get back to where my subconscious is, so that we're all on the same page now. So how do I count that, in terms of keystrokes on keyboard or whatever? And then there, you get these weird research rabbit holes that are very useful. They're intensely useful. A lot of writers will talk about something they call filling the well. That in order to write, you have to have a bunch of stuff floating around in your head. And so you have to spend time kind of putting things into your head so that you will have something to pour out. Even if it's, I need a description of a mountain, so I'm going to go back and look at my photographs that I've taken on various trips of mountains to find the mountain that I think is going to be the mountain in this story. So, it's really important from kind of a development, from an R&D standpoint, but maybe not so important with putting words into the manuscript. So I end up saying, like, it takes me about 6 months to do a rough draft of about an 80,000 word novel. But then there's revision, and then there's research, and then there's more revision. And I'm usually writing 2 or 3 short stories at the same time, too. So I don't know how to work that in either. So I'm sorry I don't have a good answer.
What she was saying about having other things going on, though, too, I find that useful.
It's intensely useful.
Because if you're stuck on one story and it's just not cooperating, you're like, well, I'm going to make you jealous, neener. And I'm going to go work on this other, shiny new idea over here. And then while you're doing that, your subconscious will take care of things, and then you could come back and you've got fresh perspective on the old story, and you're able to continue with it. So I do have, and sometimes these stories never go anywhere. These other stories, I just kind of start working with them, and that it's like a creative exercise or whatever that will allow me to go back and work on the main project that I'm going to get paid for. So she was right that if, short stories are not going to pay all the bills, it'll get you a few tacos. But it is going,
Tacos are good.
Who doesn't like a good taco? But at the same time, it is something you have to do sometime for yourself as a creative person. You got to write some of these shorter works, and sometimes those will lead you into breakthroughs in your larger one.
I think that one of the things we know, if you're a writer, is that you don't have a 9-to-5 job as a writer. It's 24/7. 365 days. You never stop. Your office is in your head. You take it home with you. I think about my writing all the time, and don't necessarily do so in an organized fashion. It just pops up. I can be at a cocktail party having a really good time, and suddenly I get this idea about how to fix something or how to change something. You can't shut that down once it starts, so you fiddle around with that for a while, and people look at you and say, what's wrong with him?
We really do write notes on napkins.
Yeah,
that
you
really
do.
happens.
You can do stuff like that. So there's that. And for me, I found dedicated writing time helps because I am brain dead after 3, number 1. So I wake early and write early, and I make it a point. I think it's a bad idea to go on the internet. I think it's a bad idea to do anything else except start writing. And I like to stop at a place where it's easy for me to pick up again and go on. I try to do 3 to 5 pages every time I sit down. That works well for me because I'm disciplined enough now that it seems to be okay. If you don't get there, fine. If you take it off, it doesn't matter. You can do all that stuff. But it's good. As far as the direct answer to the question, I don't know that it's possible to measure how much time you go into the planning because the planning continues. The writing tells you what the story needs to be the more you get into it. So you're planning and replanning and reconfiguring as you go through your story. So the two become meshed together in a way that is difficult to separate out.
You are always thinking as you're going along, even here at the con, I'm seeing so much stuff that I'm like, I'm going to use that later. Not cosplay, but I mean, some of the cosplay, yeah, actually, right.
It's very inspirational.
But I was on the way down here. There was one woman in a costume that I don't even know what made me go, whoa, I got to use those. Were her eyes? They were totally gray, and they were not contacts. So I thought, wow, that's a really unusual eye color, and I need to make sure I use that at some point, somewhere down the road. So you're always thinking about stuff as you go, just your everyday life. Just going out and living your life is really preparation for the next thing you're going to write. So,
Carrie, you mentioned not knowing how to count the backspace key. I was wondering how much of the work of writing is revising? Like, what percentage of a novel is cut and left on the floor by the time you're done writing?
That's another thing that's really hard to measure empirically, because it varies from novel to novel. You know, I've had ones that came together much better than others. I'm working on one now that is, it's really ambitious. It's a thing I haven't done before. It's a novel that's coming out next year. I'm still in the revision stage. It's a post-apocalyptic murder mystery. And I've never really written like a classic murder mystery structure, so I'm working really hard on kind of studying that structure and making sure everything is set up, which means I'm doing a lot more revision on this one than I usually do. I'm kind of having to really look at the plot and the story in ways that I haven't, to see where there is room for more, for like more intrigue and more mystery and more clues and more suspects. And you know, the key in a mystery is that you have more than one person who could have actually done it. And kind of juggling that is really hard. So like this book in particular has kind of given me a run for my money right now. And a lot of it is just the patience, you know, having the patience to actually do those things that you need to do. But then I've had other books that just flew, you know, that flew by and you know, came together really well and were very well structured, you know, from the get-go. And I knew how they ended and I knew how they were going to work. So those, not so much. But every book needs revision because I'd say it's 50% just from a conceptual standpoint, because you have a rough draft. And ideally, you have learned things about the story as you wrote that you didn't know when you started. And ideally, you will then go back and construct the entire. That's how those splashes happen, what I just did there. You know, and so ideally, once you have learned more about the book, you can pick out some more thematic issues and pick out some character issues and maybe pick out some things that you didn't realize were there that you can then go back and kind of spruce up a little bit and beef up a little bit and make convince people you planned it this way all along, you know, and you know, convince people that this novel was fully formed from your head just the way it was written. But in order to do that, it takes a lot of very careful kind of, you know, construction and polishing and moving things around and making sure things are in the right order. And looking at it from the reader's point of view, you know, I think we're also focused on getting the story in our heads onto the paper. That a really important step to learn is to then look at what's on the paper from the reader's point of view, and how are they going to approach this? And is your writing producing the effect that you want it to have on the writer? And that's what you do in revision. You don't do that in the first draft. You do that later on when you're trying to turn this massive words into a cohesive whole.
You make this sound so hard.
I know, right?
I may never write another word.
I do a lot of work in revision because I most of the time don't know what the hell I'm doing on that first draft.
Do you not need to revise as much after a long career?
Do I what?
Do you not need to revise as much after a long career?
That's not true. I don't. But my process is entirely different than Carrie's. I do a lot of prep work before I go into a book, first of all, with outlining and character profiles and POV and thematic structure and so forth. So I'm pretty set on things. But then when you begin to write it all changes. But I have to revise as I go. And I will not finish a chapter until it's perfect. And if it changed something that affects the previous chapters, I have to go back and fix those too. Because the monk part of me won't stand for it. The end result is, when I'm done with the book, I'll do a quick polish and I'm done. That's it. Then it goes off to the editor. Well, it goes to my wife for a first read, and then to the editor. And it'll get a few more, you know, changes along the way, but I'm substantially complete with it at that point, unless I get the word that somehow I've screwed up. That's just how it works for me.
And all perfectly valid, right? Everybody's process being different, there's no one right way. No chosen path or anything like that. My particular process falls probably somewhere in between of theirs. I do have an outline and so on. Hounded required 5 different passes of edits with my editor But now I'm down to 2, where I'd make one big revision after her letter, and then just tiny little tweaks to a couple of sentences here and there, and that's it. So I learned a lot after getting that first one done, and I know what my editor likes and that kind of stuff. So I'm much better at fixing things, and you do get better as you go, I think.
You have very well, Padawan.
Yeah. Dang it, I'm not a Jedi yet.
Okay, so all of us can live vicariously through your guys' success. What is the best part of writing professionally?
No pants.
No pants.
No pants.
The bathroom.
You guys are so lucky I wore pants today.
I think, for me, the best part of writing has always been writing.
Mm-hmm.
I love the process. I don't actually care about the book once it's done, except that I want readers to buy it, of course. I want them to love it, but the book belongs to the readers once I'm done with it. And I very seldom go back and even look at them again unless I'm doing research for something I've forgotten that I need to check and so on. But the process is everything for me. I just enjoy it. And the harder it is, the better I like it. Because the whole puzzle-solving process, the putting together words to create images and story and so forth, for me, is the thing that's intensely enjoyable.
That's one of the cool things about, I've been a published novelist for 11 years now, and I still really love it. But, being able to do it professionally, I like setting my own schedule, kind of having my own office, setting everything up, not really answering to anybody but, the readers and your publisher or whatever. I will never be able to work a day job like an actual. My mom gets mad at me because I tell people I don't have a real job. She says, "But you work very hard. you have a job." I'm like, "No, I don't. It doesn't feel like a job at all. I'm not working. What is this?"
It's a great job.
I noticed immediately that I get to travel a lot more than I used to. At being a high school English teacher, you're pretty much trapped at your school for eternity. That's the way I felt anyway. And a lot of kids do, they're always surprised if they see you outside of your classroom, like, you can exist outside of school. So that part, I love the fact that I've been able to travel and see much more of this country and some other countries that, I never would have been able to do before. And part of that is sometimes the publisher is flying me somewhere, but more often I'm just kind of going, and then I get to write it off as a business expense because I'm doing research for my next book. So that part has been tremendous. I've always wanted to see things, and I really believe you have to almost kind of go somewhere to get the feeling of it. The air here and the attitude of people here is much different than in Arizona or in California or whatever. So that's something you don't pick up by going to Google Earth, you have to kind of get there and really feel the ambience before you can really translate that accurately, I think, onto the page.
So conversely, what's the worst part of being a writer?
The writing? I don't know.
Crippling insecurity?
Yeah, you have to start over every single time.
Yeah.
I think every time you write a book, you're proving yourself all over again. And if you have a mindset like mine, you think that every book you write has to be at least as good as the last one you wrote, because people have paid money for this thing. And I am intensely aware of the fact that when I buy a book and I spend my $30 or whatever it is, and it's crappy, I'm going to hunt the writer down and shake him good. Don't disappoint me with this. I just spent money on your book. So I feel like you owe that to your reading public. So
There's a lot of waiting that they kind of don't tell you about. You write your book, and then you wait to hear from the agents, and you wait to hear from the publisher, and you wait for a long time to see if you've sold the book or not. And then you sell it, and it's a big celebration, yay! And then you wait for the copy edits, and then you wait for it to come out, and then you wait for the first reviews, and then you wait to hear what people are going to hear about it. When I started when I was a teenager in writing, I was just printing things off and showing them to people all the time. I wanted people to read it right now, and it's really hard sometimes to wait that I've got a book coming out in January. I'm sorry you can't read it now. You have to wait until January. And I wish you could read it right now. There's a lot of waiting, and it's hard sometimes.
Going back to the insecurity thing, my wife is pretty much figured out now that I have these stages, where at some point I'm going to hate what I just wrote, and the whole book sucks, and I suck. She goes, "Oh no, not this again." We're at that point, are we? All right, let me go through it for you again, Kevin. And she does her duty and goes ahead and gives me the pep talk and everything. But yeah, it's something that happens with every book, and it never goes away. I don't think I've met one writer who's very confident in his writing. Yeah.
But we don't like it.
Yeah. But when you do run into somebody like that, you're like, you're not really normal. Because everybody else, it does have that insecurity. So, I mean, if you guys are feeling that kind of stuff, well, guess what? New York Times bestsellers feel that too.
So this was a real conversation I had with my mom. Mom, I'm done this book. It's terrible. This is the one that's going to sink everything. Carrie, you always say that. Yeah, but this time it's true. Carrie, you always say that too. Yeah, I know I always say that, but this time it's really, really true. And you always say that too. and we must have gone on for like 4 iterations of that, and she's just like, stop, just stop.
I think it's true for me too. I always reach a point where I think this book is crap. I don't know if this is the end of my career, but there's also a point in every book where I realize something about the story that I didn't see, which is interesting. There's a major discovery about something I'd been writing to that I hadn't realized when I started out, and now all of a sudden I see, this destination or this particular plot development or something that's crucial to the story working the way it works, and that's kind of exciting when you find that.
Absolutely.
Do you have any tricks for staying sane?
Who says that we have?
All I'm saying, no, it's Tammy over here.
You're making some assumptions there.
No, wait, tricks for what?
Staying sane? Sounds like this is really stressful.
Well, that presupposes we're not.
Yeah.
Or maybe that we are.
We are.
That's what I'm questioning the assumption of the question.
Yeah.
Okay, that was a bad question.
So, functional, that might be a better, how do we stay functional? That might be a better way of putting it. I don't know.
I don't practice law anymore.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, I quit teaching.
my
That
day
helped a
job.
lot. Yeah.
I did want to ask about that. How long did each of you retain your day jobs, if you had one, and do you regret how long you kept it?
Well, I practiced law for 9 years after I published Sword, Elfstones, Wish Song, and Magic Kingdom, all of which sold very well, and any of which probably would have funded a sensible person. But I was afraid I would freeze up with extra time and not be able to work. So I probably, I'm not sure. It probably taught me the discipline thing of things sufficiently, because I was still a raw young writer at the beginning there. So I think probably, I could argue I stayed there too long, but on the other hand, you can't rewrite history. So
I was an administrative assistant in an accounting office. And I quit that job a year after my first book came out. And I had intended to work for longer, but that job situation actually became untenable. So I quit that job and I temped for a year. So I was writing, I think, my 3rd and 4th books while temping at various things. I was, for a while, I did the standardized test grading mills that you read about in the news, where you've got a bunch of very low-paid people who are deciding your children's future. So I'm really sorry. That was the job I had when I got my first royalty check, and I walked out the next day, pretty much. Because, at that point, they tell you not to quit your day job, but if you have a really, really crappy, awful day job, because at that point, I got the royalty check, and I felt like I was selling my time for $11 an hour. And that's what it was doing. I was basically selling my time. And then I got this really nice royalty check, because it turns out the first book did very well, much better than people were expecting. And my time was so much more valuable than $11 an hour at that point. And I've heard that advice from a lot of people. I had intended to have a lot more in savings, but that was totally the right time to quit, because my time, I could not keep selling my time at that low a price. And that's what I hear is that when it's very clear to you that you are losing money by not quitting your day job is when you need to quit your day job.
oh, makes sense.
Yeah.
I wrote the first 5 books of the Iron Druid Chronicles while still a full-time high school English teacher, plus doing the announcements or the play-by-play at the football games. That was a lot of fun. But yeah. I was an amateur announcer fella. So the first 5 books were written, but of course you write them ahead of when they're published. So when Tricked came out and hit the New York Times, I still had about a month or so left on my teaching contract, and that was that. I didn't come back. And so Hunted then therefore was the first book that I wrote as a complete full-time writer, and I have not regretted missing a single faculty meeting, I have to tell you. It's been great.
I'm going to throw it up to the audience soon, but before that, what advice would you guys give other young aspiring writers?
Just finish your work. Because if you don't, how do you get better? Like I said, the most valuable thing that I learned from writing my first book was that I could write a book. You have that doubt that you'll ever get done until you actually do it. So sit down in your chair and get it done. And the way I did it was, 500 to 1,000 words a day. Just that steady production will get you to the end. And if you have a bad day or you have to, do something with the family, fine, but get back to it as soon as you can. And just be as consistent as possible so that you get done within a year. Hounded did take me 11 months, but I had no contract, I had no deadline, and I was just writing to entertain myself. And just remarkably, it turned out that other people were entertained by the same things I was. But once I got my contract, I sold Hounded, and then they're like, well, okay, we want you to write the next 2 books quick, and we're going to release those as well at the same time, basically. So I wrote Hexed in 5 months and Hammered in 6. So it took me, the same amount of time that it took to write Hounded, I wrote 2 more books, afterward. Because deadlines are motivating because they pay you when you finish. So anyway, I would just say make sure you just keep going and finish your work.
Yeah, so a double-spaced manuscript page is about 250 words, give or take some. If you write one of those a day, at the end of the year, you'll have 365 pages, and that's a book. Mm-hmm. That's 250 words a day, that's like a paragraph. I think every writer talks about writing every day, but sometimes we set these very lofty goals, like 1,000 words, 5,000 words a day. And then those are hard, and then we don't do them, and then we get angry at ourselves, and then we quit, and then we have to start again. But 250 words is a page, and 365 pages is a book. So little baby steps are good. The other advice I would give, especially if you want to be published, if you want to be a working writer, is research the business. The business has changed a lot in the last 10 years. It's a little bit crazy right now. There's a lot going on out there. Take a little bit of time to read, some agent blogs, read Writer's Digest, find out how things work. Because when you get to the point where you have finished, you're at the end of the year and you have your beautiful manuscript there, you want to give it the best chance it can.
Just to piggyback on that really quickly, I was just talking, my editor was visiting last week, and I asked her, is it still kind of insane? She's reading, 10 books a week. She can read super fast, she kind of has to. And I said, all right, so you're getting all agented submissions. Every single manuscript she gets is from an agented writer, and she is only picking 2. And so she's reading 100-something books a year, and she's picking 2 to publish. So the odds are tough, and I still am like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm published at this point. And so that right there just tells you really have to be ready for that market, and make sure you get an agent that's going to work for you and really believes in your work and has, a record of sales and stuff like that. But that's just one editor at Del Rey. Other editors might have picked up those books instead. And then, of course, there are other houses. A lot of those books do wind up finding homes. I'm just saying, but for this one editor, they're reading 100-something books, and they're only deciding to pick up 2 new writers or so a year. Then, of course, they have their writers that they're already established with. Like, I bring in my next book, and they're editing that. But that's how, they're only doing a few new writers every year. So.
I think you have to be patient with yourself. You're going to write a lot of crap. And I forget which famous writer it was that said, somebody like Ray Bradbury said, write 1,000,000 pages, throw them away, and you're ready. And there's some truth in that. You will write a lot of stuff that isn't going to work. So you can't expect that you're going to write a gem the first time out. And because writing is a craft, and it is an education, ongoing education, you should read. Because that's how you learn how successful writers have created a story that works. And if you have the ability to suss out what it is that they've done that makes their story so compelling, it will inform you about how to do things as well. And it doesn't stop. I mean, I'm 72. I'm still learning what writers do by reading what they've done and how, and I find wonderful books virtually weekly that I'm impressed by and amazed that they've done something truly wonderful with their prose. So I think those two things are the things I think are really important.
We have about 10 minutes. Are there any questions in the audience?
None at all.
Let's start right there.
Hi, I came across this concept yesterday that in any piece of media, there is, we write, it comes out, and it's meant for entertainment. But under that is an inherent layer of interpretation, for the reviewers and people who just love the craft. So my question to you guys is, what percentage of your writing does it go into making it entertaining, and what percentage does it go into you trying to put in meaning into it that people will pick up if they love it?
I don't know that those are mutually exclusive things. That's.
The question was, if anyone didn't hear it, how much of the writing is about entertaining people and how much is about giving meaning and, I guess, depth?
I was taught by my esteemed editor, Lester Del Rey, that the first thing you do, your first obligation is to tell a good story. So I guess that would be entertainment. So you start with that. But I also think you need to write for yourself. I don't know about this underlying stuff. I do thematic structure, which means I'm usually pissed about something that I'm writing about underneath everything. But I think what Carrie just said is right. I don't know if those are mutually exclusive. I don't care about the critics at all, because they are one person. They don't impact your life as a writer. I used to worry about those things. Now I think, I don't care if they all hate me. It doesn't make any difference. As long as readers like the books, that's what counts.
I would agree. I write to entertain myself. Like I said, I wrote Hounded entirely just to geek out about stuff that I mythology and Shakespeare and doggies. And so I just like that stuff, So I just mashed it all up into a story, and then it turned out other folks liked it too. So I don't approach it with, I'm going to insert all of these themes for later study. Actually, I do one thing just because. I put goats and spleens in every single one of my books because I really want somebody someday to try to write a paper on it. And what was his purpose?
You're that guy.
Yeah, I just wanted. I would love to read that paper. I'm like, because I just do it randomly. I just put a goat in there for whatever reason, and I want to see somebody try really hard to make it seem like I had a purpose. No, I just wanted to make you sweat.
Let me just tell you, your efforts are in vain. And this is why I know. 10 years ago, I wrote a section of the story I was telling, and I won't tell you which one, in which the characters had a relationship, and I never used a pronoun. Now, one single person came up and said, oh, this looks like two women, or two men, or whatever. Well, actually, it's more specific than that. But the point is that I thought, isn't this clever? I got this all in there, and it's a gay relationship, and nobody noticed it. And then I realized, well, damn, nobody noticed it.
I give myself projects on some books, like Kitty's House of Horrors. I wanted to tell my own slasher horror movie, except kind of in reverse, like all the monsters are trapped in the cabin getting killed off one by one, and they have to figure out who's doing it. But that was for me, it was like, I want to do this thing because it's been a bug in the back of my head, and I want to tell, a horror movie where actually everybody's actually competent, and write that story and see what that looks like. And but yeah, it was like I was the audience for that. I wasn't necessarily doing it to see if anybody would pick up on anything. That was just sort of this is my mission statement for this book. This is my project. This is the thing that I'm that I want to work on. And I've had a couple of books like that where it's like, I want to write a screwball comedy. What would that look like? And how can I do that? And but yeah, hopefully it's entertaining. I really want to be entertaining, but it also, it's like Kevin said, it kind of all starts with us.
We got 5 minutes left. Way back there in the back.
I just had a question about names for characters and world building. How much time do you spend on that before you start?
First of all, awesome Starbuck cosplay. Rock on. Go Battlestar. I do spend a little bit of time on it with the names and so on, but I will come back and fix them later if I don't like them. And I'll just do a find and replace when I come up with something better, because I can't let it spend so much time on it that I never get down to writing the story about them. So I'll just fix it later if I need to.
Yeah, brackets are my friends. I've been known if I can't think up the right name, I brackets this guy. I finished a book and then changed the name of one of the main character. Search and replace is a wonderful, wonderful thing. But be very careful that it isn't searching and replacing
The wrong part of the
like
word.
prepositions. Ask me how I know this.
This character.
But yeah, that's actually a problem. That I've talked to a lot of writers who they'll have encyclopedias about their world and not yet gotten to the point of writing the story. And there's a point where you just have to kind of close the book on your world building and set it aside. Because you'll discover things. You'll discover that the story demands certain things to happen that will change your world building, and that's a cool process as well. So sometimes it's just you just have to make an effort to step away from it and know that you can go back later. None of this is set in stone. You are the god of your world. You can change it all if you want to.
I keep a list of names that I've stolen from everywhere. And when it's time to do a book, I'll sit down and work on the names. Names are very important, I think. And they should do something to define the place or the character or the creature or something like that. It should resonate in some way with the reader. So I work hard at getting the names to fit, but I think everybody has to be fluid, of course. Every writer has to be fluid with those names and not over-obsess about the fact that the name isn't working out.
We got about 2 minutes left. Can we just go down the road and have you tell all of us what you're working on right now?
I'm working on an epic fantasy right now called A Plague of Giants, and I'm just about done with my edits on that. We're expecting delivery to my editor next month, and then I'll be able to give you a publication date after that. And then after that, I'm writing a short story collection of all new stuff for the Iron Druid.
I'm working on a couple of things right now. As I mentioned, the post-apocalyptic murder mystery. It's called Bannerless. The draft is due to my editor July, so I will be leaving here and going home and working on that revision. I'm also working on a short story for an anthology edited by Joseph Nassis called Urban Enemies. We're a bunch of urban fantasy. Oh, you're in that too?
I'm in that too.
A bunch of urban fantasy writers. We are writing stories from the point of view of our villains. So I am writing a story about Roman, and I'm very excited about it. I'm having fun.
I hear there's no money in short stories.
I so want the taco though. Yeah.
I'm writing the end of the genre series, so I'm into a 4-book commitment. I do a book a year no matter what, so my schedule's laid out pretty clearly. I've written the first book, which will publish next year. I'm about halfway through the book that will publish in whatever years after that, 18. I'll probably write them all in the next 2 years.
Do you have titles for them yet?
Sure.
We yet? No, okay, never mind. Alrighty, I'm Eneasz Brodski. You guys are Denver Comic Con. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much. I don't have anything else for 4 hours, so if you want to come chat, please come say hi.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much.